The second half of the 90s was a strange time for horror. The genre was split in two. On one side, the slick, self-aware slashers born from Scream. On the other, a wave of darker, stranger films that didn't fit into neat boxes. These were the movies that played at 11 p.m. on cable and were stacked on the lower shelves of the rental store. This era was caught between the past and the future. Practical effects were fading out, CGI was still clumsy, and studios were taking wild chances on anything that felt new. Angels at war, internet cults, cannibal soldiers, demonic wish granters. They were bigger, bolder, and weirder than what came before, but most of them slipped through the cracks. These aren't the blockbusters or the household names. These are the horror films that defined the end of the VHS era. Ambitious, eerie, and unforgettable once you've seen them. So tonight, we're rewinding to 1995 through 1999. 10 horror films that deserved more attention. Some were ahead of their time. Some were just too strange to find an audience, but every one of them is worth rediscovering. Disturbing Behavior, 1998. If The Faculty was the cool kid of late 90s teen horror, Disturbing Behavior was its darker, moodier cousin. The one that sat in the back of the classroom and knew something was off. Released in 1998, it's a mix of The Stepford Wives and The X-Files, wrapped in flannel and post-grunge paranoia. Set in a seemingly perfect Pacific Northwest town, the film follows a group of outcast teens who discover their classmates are being brainwashed into obedient, violent model citizens. James Marsden, Katie Holmes, and Nick Stahl lead the cast, bringing surprising weight to what could have been pure pulp. The real story, though, is behind the scenes. The studio famously slashed nearly 30 minutes from director David Nutter's original cut, stripping away much of the mystery and world building. What's left still works. Moody cinematography, a great soundtrack, and that late 90s atmosphere where rebellion and conformity blur together. But the uncut version that surfaced later proved what fans suspected. This was meant to be more sci-fi tragedy than teen slasher. It flopped on release, overshadowed by Scream clones and its own marketing confusion. But it found life on VHS and cable, where its tone fit perfectly, that mix of angst, dread, and corporate horror that defined the decade. Disturbing Behavior isn't perfect, but it's endlessly rewatchable. It's what happens when 90s horror tries to say something real about control, rebellion, and identity, and nearly gets away with it. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, 1995. When Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight hit theaters in 1995, it wasn't just another horror spin-off. It was the franchise's first and only feature-length story that truly captured the show's pulp energy. Directed by Ernest Dickerson, the film turns a motel in the middle of nowhere into the last stand between heaven and hell. Billy Zane stars as the Collector, a charming demon hunting for a mystical key filled with the blood of Christ. Standing in his way is a drifter named Breaker, played by William Sadler, who uses the Relic to seal doorways and keep the monsters out. What follows is a siege movie with personality. Equal parts Evil Dead 2, From Dusk Till Dawn, and Saturday Night Cable chaos. The cast is loaded with familiar faces. Jada Pinkett, Before the Smith, Thomas Hayden Church, and Dick Miller, a who's who of 90s genre regulars. Zane steals the show, though, turning his performance into a demonic carnival act. Every line is delivered like he knows he's in the coolest B-movie ever made. The effects are gloriously practical. Gallons of slime, rubber creatures, and enough blue lighting to fill a decade. It's loud, wild, and self-aware without becoming parody. Despite strong reviews from horror fans, Demon Knight was overshadowed by flashier studio releases and a weak follow-up, Bordello of Blood. But time's been kind to it. Demon Knight stands as a perfect snapshot of mid-90s horror. Inventive, funny, and made by people who loved monsters as much as they loved midnight movies. It's the kind of film that played best with friends, a VHS, and the lights just low enough that you weren't sure what might crawl out of the shadows next. Wishmaster, 1997. By the late 90s, most horror icons had worn out their welcome, And then Wishmaster came along, reminding everyone that monsters could still be fun. Produced by Wes Craven and directed by Robert Kurtzman of K&B Effects, the film unleashed one of horror's most underrated villains, the Djinn. The story begins when an ancient jewel releases a demonic genie, played with theatrical menace by Andrew Divoff. Unlike the wish-granting spirits of fairy tales, this one twists desires into carnage. Someone wishes to be beautiful forever and turns to stone. Someone else wishes for eternal life and gets trapped in a nightmare. Divoff makes the movie. His performance walks a perfect line between charming and grotesque, delivering lines with serpentine glee. The makeup design, all latex and detail, is some of the best practical creature work of the 90s. Kurtzman and K&B clearly relished their chance to show off. Cameos from horror royalty like Kane Hodder, Tony Todd, and Robert Englund made it a playground for genre fans. Released in 1997, it didn't make a huge theatrical splash, but its VHS cover, that sinister red gemstone and tagline, "Be careful what you wish for," was impossible to miss. The sequels veered straight to video, but the original remains the standout, equal parts gruesome fairy tale and supernatural morality play. Wishmaster is everything late 90s horror should be: loud, stylish, and proudly unreal. It doesn't wink at the audience. It grins, sharp teeth and all, daring you to make a wish. Phantoms, 1998. Based on a Dean Koontz novel, Phantoms is one of those movies that should have been a hit. Directed by Joe Chappelle and produced by Dimension Films, it sits right between the Relic and the Faculty. Part monster movie, part sci-fi mystery, and all atmosphere. The story begins in the small Colorado town of Snowfield, where two sisters arrive to find everyone dead or missing. What starts as a crime scene slowly turns into something cosmic, an ancient shape-shifting entity beneath the earth capable of mimicking and consuming its victims. It calls itself the Ancient Enemy, and by the time it starts using the faces of the dead to speak, you know this isn't your typical creature feature. The cast is pure 90s. Rose McGowan, Peter O'Toole, and Ben Affleck as the world's youngest sheriff. Affleck's casting gets joked about now, but he plays it straight, and that seriousness helps the tone. The effects mix practical goo and early CGI, and while the visuals haven't aged perfectly, the mood has. It's cold, quiet, and full of dread. Koontz's fingerprints are all over the themes: religion, science, and the idea of ancient evil lurking beneath modern civilization. It's not perfect, but it's fascinating. For fans of The Relic or The Thing, Phantom scratches that same itch. Smart enough to intrigue, gory enough to satisfy. And yes, for trivia buffs, this is the movie where Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back coined the line, "Affleck was the bomb in Phantoms, yo." But the truth is, they kind of weren't wrong. Ravenous, 1999. Few horror films feel as truly one-of-a-kind as Ravenous. Directed by Antonia Bird, it's a darkly comic, savage, and strangely beautiful story about hunger. For food, for power, and for survival. Set during the Mexican-American War, it follows a disgraced soldier, played by Guy Pearce, who's sent to a remote mountain outpost in the Sierra Nevada. When a stranger, Robert Carlyle, arrives claiming his wagon party was attacked by cannibals, the soldiers head into the mountains to investigate, and quickly realize the real danger isn't behind them. Carlyle's performance is electric, alternating between charming and monstrous, and the film morphs from historical drama into blood-soaked nightmare. What sets Ravenous apart is its tone. It's a cannibal movie, yes, but it's also slyly funny, using dark humor to explore human greed and consumption. The score, by Damon Albarn of Blur and composer Michael Nyman, shifts from playful banjo rhythms to dissonant horror cues, keeping you off balance. The film's production was chaotic. 2 directors left before Bird was hired, yet somehow it became one of the most unique horror films of the 90s. It flopped in theaters, but critics and fans have reappraised it as a masterpiece of mood and metaphor. Watching it now, Ravenous feels like a gothic fever dream. Funny one moment, horrifying the next. It's the kind of film that couldn't exist today when everything needs to fit a formula. In 1999, it didn't fit any, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Strangeland, 1998. Before social media, Strangeland was warning us what happens when you meet the wrong person online. Released in 1998, it was written by and starred Dee Snider of Twisted Sister fame, playing one of horror's strangest late 90s creations, Captain Howdy. The film follows a small-town detective, played by Kevin Gage, searching for his daughter after she's abducted by a sadistic man who lures victims through internet chat rooms. But Captain Howdy isn't your typical killer. He's a body modification zealot obsessed with ritual pain and enlightenment. What follows is half techno-thriller, half modern gothic freak show. Snyder took inspiration from real-life body art culture and his fear that the internet would erase accountability. It's not subtle. The soundtrack pounds industrial metal, the visuals drip with piercing needles and suspension hooks, but it feels uniquely of its time. There's a sincerity beneath the shock, a sense that Snyder genuinely wanted to comment on the collision between new technology and old evil. Though critics didn't get it, Strangeland found its audience through late-night cable and word of mouth. It's stylish, uncomfortable, and weirdly prescient. Years before the phrase online predator became common. In the end, it's less about gore and more about transformation. What happens when obsession turns physical? Strangeland may not be polished, but it's fearless, a dark relic of the early internet age that hits harder the older it gets. The Night Flier, 1997. There's something quietly haunting about The Night Flier, a Stephen King adaptation that never made much noise but lingers long after you've seen it. Directed by Mark Pavia, it follows Richard Dees, a tabloid journalist played by Miguel Ferrer, chasing what he believes is a serial killer flying a private plane between small airports. The twist? The killer might actually be a vampire. It's a grimy, cynical story, King's world of bottom-rung journalists and the monsters they create. Ferrer plays Dees as a man already rotted from the inside, chasing a story not to reveal the truth, but to own it. As his investigation spirals, the film builds a sense of dread that feels closer to noir than horror, culminating in one of the most effective vampire reveals of the decade. The practical effects, handled on a small budget, deliver more impact than most big studio horrors of the time. There's no glamour to this vampire. It's a decayed ancient predator hiding in hangars and moonlight. While it didn't get the attention of other King adaptations like Thinner or The Green Mile, The Night Flier quietly became a cult favorite. It's a rare film that understands the horror of curiosity, of looking too long into something you can't unsee. It's grim, stylish, and unflinching. The Night Flier doesn't care about jump scares. It's about obsession, decay, and the slow rot that comes from chasing monsters until you become one. Lord of Illusions, 1995. Clive Barker's Lord of Illusions arrived in 1995, and like most of Barker's work, it was too strange to fit comfortably anywhere. Part detective noir, part occult nightmare. Directed by Barker himself, it adapted his short story, The Last Illusion, and starred Scott Bakula as Private Eye Harry Damour, a man whose cases always seem to end in blood and magic. When he investigates the death of a stage magician, he uncovers a cult that believes the illusionist Nyx, played by Daniel von Bargen, is a literal god who can reshape reality. What follows is a blend of mystical horror, detective grit, and apocalyptic prophecy, complete with demonic stage tricks, and Barker's trademark fascination with temptation and transformation. Barker fought the studio over cuts, claiming they softened the film's darker religious elements, but even in its theatrical form, it's packed with ideas. It's horror that feels lived in, closer to Angel Heart than Hellraiser. While it never found mainstream footing, Lord of Illusions built a cult following on home video. Fans connected with its sense of dread and moral ambiguity, the idea that there's no clean line between real magic and evil. Watching it now, it's a time capsule from when studios still gambled on directors with imagination, letting them mix genres just to see what might appear from the shadows. The Relic, 1997. The Relic brought classic monster movie energy into the world of glossy 90s thrillers. Directed by Peter Hyams, it's part aliens, part museum mystery, and all atmosphere. a rare creature feature that still feels ambitious. The story follows a police detective, played by Tom Sizemore, investigating a string of gruesome murders inside Chicago's Field Museum. The culprit turns out to be a hybrid beast created by a mix of tribal ritual and genetic mutation, smuggled back from the Amazon. When the museum's gala night locks the doors with hundreds of guests inside, the film becomes a confined space horror that plays out like Jurassic Park on one floor. What makes the Relic stand out is its craft. The creature, designed by Stan Winston Studios, looks incredible even today. Part reptile, part insect, and entirely terrifying. Hyams, who also served as his own cinematographer, shoots with rich shadows and gleaming marble, giving the museum a gothic beauty. It underperformed in theaters, released between bigger studio horrors like Scream and The Devil's Advocate, but it thrived on VHS. Horror fans loved that it didn't wink at the audience. It played the monster movie straight, and that made it timeless. The Relic feels like one last great gasp of the practical effects era, when studios still spent millions making you believe the monster was really in the room. The Prophecy, 1995. The Prophecy might be the most quietly powerful supernatural film of its decade, not because it's loud or violent, but because it takes angels and makes them terrifying. Directed by Gregory Wyden, who also wrote Highlander and Backdraft, the film imagines a second war in heaven, fought over the fate of human souls. Christopher Walken plays the Archangel Gabriel, leading a rebellion against God. Instead of light and grace, these angels are soldiers, ruthless, arrogant, and trapped on earth. Elias Koteas plays the weary detective caught in the middle, and Viggo Mortensen steals the third act as Lucifer himself, delivering one of his most chilling performances before the Lord of the Rings made him famous. The movie's tone is cold, strange, and almost literary, more theological noir than horror. But its imagery sticks with you. Angels that drop from the sky like meteors, corpses that speak through borrowed souls, and a universe where faith feels like a burden. The Prophecy was modestly budgeted but looked far bigger, thanks to stark lighting and grounded effects. It spawned 4 direct-to-video sequels, none of which touched the first film's mood. On video shelves, though, it was everywhere, the kind of movie people rented expecting an exorcism flick and got a meditation on free will instead. It's horror with weight, a film that asks what happens when angels lose faith in their creator. The answer apparently looks a lot like 1995 Los Angeles at night. The late 90s were horror's last great experimental stretch, before remakes, before found footage, before everything had to fit into a franchise. Movies like Lord of Illusions, The Relic, and Ravenous didn't play it safe. They mixed genres, broke rules, and gave us stories that still feel unique. And maybe that's why they never hit it big. They weren't designed to. They were meant to be found later, at the rental store, or streaming at 2 a.m., when you're half asleep, and something catches your eye. So which of these movies stuck with you? Or what late 90s horror gem do you think deserves more attention? Drop it in the comments below. And if you grew up renting any of these, let's hear your stories. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out the rest of the Eject Media Horror Archive. Always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.